Well, welcome back to another edition of Maryland Family Matters. My name is Jeff Trimbath, the president of the Maryland Family Institute, and I am joined this morning with a very special friend, a very special guest for the podcast, Tim Goeglein. Tim is vice president at Focus on the Family, and more importantly than that, he's been a friend of mine. I don't know how long. Is it 25 years, 30 years? I don't know how long it's been, Tim, but
My
we've known.
friend, you're a person. I feel like we've known each other 100 years. So anything after that is icing on the cake.
That's great. Well, so glad you've made time to be with
Thank
us
you.
this morning.
Great to be
We're
with you.
we're here to talk about a new book that you have written, What Really Matters, Restoring the Legacy of Faith, Family, and Freedom. We'll get to the book in just a minute, and I want all of our listeners to go buy a copy because it's so important. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about your story, Tim. Where did you grow up, and how did you get to the DMV, as the young people now call where we live?
Born and raised in what I consider to be the greatest city in American history. I call it the center of the universe. It's my hometown, Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm very
Mm,
proud of that. The Goeglein side of the family has been in Allen County since before the Civil War. I was born and raised there. In a really wonderful family, an extended family, gifted, blessed, beyond all knowing, with extraordinary parents. My father remains my best friend and hero,
mm.
and approaching his late 80s. And but all to say, for most of my life, my young life, I knew I wanted to be in journalism,
Mm,
broadcast journalism, particularly. And one thing led to the other, and I was offered an internship in the United States Senate for the person who was then the youngest U.S. Senator, Dan Quayle of Indiana.
sure.
Yes, he beat in 1980 one of the iconic figures of Hoosier history, Birch Bayh,
Mm,
in the Reagan Revolution. And I was very honored to be an intern in his Senate office. And of course, Providence cleared his throat a few years later, and Dan Quayle went from the U.S. Senate to the White House as vice president. And the other person I had interned for in the House of Representatives, Dan Coates,
mm,
became the new U.S. Senator from Indiana. And I had been a television producer at the NBC affiliate in my hometown of Fort Wayne. And after having graduated from Indiana University in Bloomington, and came to be Dan Coates's deputy press secretary, then press secretary. And Dan Coates kept his promise. He said, I'm leaving after that partial second term."
mm,
And I thought, I'm done with politics. I'd been offered
mm.
a wonderful job, and leaving Capitol Hill after 10 years. And as Providence would have it, I ended up joining the George W. Bush for President campaign. We moved to Austin,
Mm,
and with our then young sons, and 36 days of Bush v. Gore. And the next
mm,
thing you know, I become a special assistant to the President of the United States and the Deputy Director of the Office of Public Liaison. I work directly for Karl Rove, President Bush, Karl Rove. They remain really treasured friends, as does Dan Coates and Dan Quayle.
mm.
And I'm happy to say that after nearly 8 years at the White House, I became one of the vice presidents at Focus on the Family. I oversee our office here in Washington, which I've done for 18 blissful, happy years.
Amazing.
And above all, the number one thing is I couldn't have planned any of it. I give all the gratitude humbly expressed to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Mm,
And my wonderful wife, Jenny, of nearly 35 years. We
mm.
have had a wonderful journey together, and a very happy marriage and two wonderful sons. And it's all these years later.
That's great. Love that summary, Tim. I know our relationship preceded serving in the Bush administration because
Yes,
I was there at HHS when you were at the White House,
yes,
and
indeed.
that's just great. Well, let's now talk a little bit about your new book. And this is your fourth book that you've written, What Really Matters. I want to ask you a couple of questions, but as we start, Talk about the title. What really matters? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I was sharing very recently that I had written a book called Stumbling Toward Utopia, which was a history of the moral and social revolution of the 60s and 70s. And I felt that the book, which was a great success, praise God for that, but I felt that I should have better answered the question of what are the implications of that moral and social revolution, that 20 or 30-year period. What is it? What has been its measurable impact? I'm a regular contributor to the Federalist, to the Daily Signal, the Washington Times, five different media outlets. And I write under the rubric, of marriage, family, parenting, human life, religious liberty, conscience rights, parental
Ugh,
rights.
yeah,
And I really wanted to show and to demonstrate the impact, the direct impact of the moral and social revolution on this part of the most important institutions of the 21st century. And I
yeah.
was speaking at a college, and a young woman said to me, kind of counterintuitively, she said, I agree with everything you've said, but why is the political class not speaking about what really matters? And I
Mm,
thought that's the perfect title.
yeah.
The subtitle is Restoring a Legacy of Faith, Family, and Freedom. But what really matters, I think, in this 250th year, and that's why the book cover is red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
That if we want to say to ourselves, here's our 250th year, what do we want next for America? What really matters is the book because it demonstrates, I believe, the impact on our institutions, the lowest marriage rates, the lowest fertility rates. We have a host of problems, but there are also doable and achievable solutions. And restoration, I think, is quite possible.
I love that what really matters title because it implies there are things that really don't matter as much as the things that do matter. And oftentimes we get caught up in those things that don't matter as much.
Yes.
And not that tax rates aren't important, not that tariff rates to China or minimum wage rates or environmental regulations, those things are all very important things. But for at least for us as Christians, these questions of what is a human being, what is a boy and what is a girl, what is a marriage, what are parents, what makes for healthy thriving. It seems to me that those are the things that really matters, and that's what you're talking about here in this book.
I absolutely am. And I must say, Jeff, in the way that you've articulated it, I completely agree A to Z. But
Cool.
the thing I want to share, and everybody has their own kind of story, but I have had two in my nearly 40 years in Washington that actually haunt me.
Mm,
And I think it's worth sharing. The first is that by complete providence, I was in the gallery of the U.S. Senate when my friend and former U.S. Senator Rick Santorum of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania
yeah.
was, I think it was his greatest moment in public life. He was defending the innocent preborn. And he was in the middle of a quite contentious debate over the question that you've raised: what's a human?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we all know what a human is.
Right.
And we know when human life begins. We indisputably know that objectively. And he said, "It's a baby. It's a baby." And when he said this, across the entire Senate chamber, a baby was actually in the gallery and began to cry out. I mean, it
Mm,
was the voice, I think, of the angels reminding all of us that that's what really matters. What
yeah.
really matters is marriage, family, parenting. What really matters is our babies and children. So that was one affirmation, and I think really haunted our progressive friends because they've really run out of arguments, in their defense of the culture of death. It's a moral relativism on steroids, and it's nihilistic.
And yet, since that poignant moment in the Senate, and I remember it,
Yes,
2004, five, somewhere around that time, 20 years ago. Since then, we have now shifted, at least on the life debate, from safe, legal, and rare under the Clinton administration to shout your abortion, to
yes,
let's rent a mobile abortion clinic and park
yes,
it at the convention of a major political party in
right.
America.
Right.
It's gone from something in the shadows to something that we're now proud of. So, what an
Yes.
amazing reminder for you to publish this book right now to remind us of this that really matters. Things have changed.
They have. You know, one of my late great friends was one of the most distinguished professors at Harvard of the entire 20th century. And
Mm,
he began as a man of the far left and began, moving rightward the more that he spent time as a scholar. And he ended up writing the most important book on American slavery. And
mm,
I've read this book multiple times. And when you look at the arguments of American slavery, what the slavers were actually saying, it's very similar in their rhetoric
yeah.
to what the abortion celebrants like to say, and the arguments they use. Shakespeare has that very powerful observation, doesn't he? That the devil can quote scripture when he needs it. The those who have spent their lives celebrating the destruction of the innocent preborn should rightfully be haunted by that. The second thing I was going to share very
Yeah.
briefly
Yeah.
is that less than a year ago, I got a knock on the front door, and it was a young woman wearing a Planned Parenthood T-shirt, and she was lobbying. And I wanted to hear what she had to say. And
Yeah.
she spoke in paragraphs, and she, really was sharing with me why Planned Parenthood needed not to be defunded. And I wanted to hear all of her arguments. And I said, you don't know me and I don't know you. I've heard your arguments. I'd like to ask you a question, ship anything. And
Yeah.
I said, are you aware that since 1973, 83 million abortions have been imposed in the United States? That 83 million innocent preborn babies are not with us,
Mm,
many of whom are no longer here because of Planned Parenthood. I just ask civilly and diplomatically, are you aware of that?
mm,
She had nothing to say. It was silent, and she turned and walked away.
wow.
And my view is that I think we need to go tell a new generation that there is a better way forward. That we don't need to do that anymore. We
Yeah.
don't have to spend any more time defending bad public policy that is terribly destructive. And there is a better way forward. And I think Rick Santorum and those in the pro-life movement and the arguments that I've marshaled and what really matters, I think that's a better way forward.
That's great. That's great. Well, let's get into some of those arguments you
Great.
make in the book. It's arranged under a broad heading, and these are a collection of a lot of the columns you've written over the last several years. Really helpful. As I read through it, I was reminded of Charles Krauthammer's wonderful summary of his columns, which is on my shelf here. It's just a wonderful read. You talk about marriage and family, which are sort of the bulwarks of the society, and for us here in Maryland, I often say to our friends, we disagree with Wes Moore on just about every policy idea he embraces, but the thing that I appreciate most about him is the fact that he is married to the mother of his children.
Hmm.
The fact that he is a good appears to be we don't know his marriage specifics, but he's a dedicated husband and father. What a great example to all
Hmm.
of us here in Maryland. And so I'm so delighted you begin with those two subjects. Is there a reason why you started? Is there an order to how these chapters are arranged?
There is. And in fact, the restoration of marriage is where I begin because of all of the problems
Mm,
in the spiritual crisis that besets 21st century America, Jeff, I believe indisputably marriage is top. If we can address successfully the marriage crisis, I think we will in time address the fertility crisis. And the other crises that I write about. But I'd like to address, if I may, the issue you raised with Governor Moore, because as
yeah.
you know, I write about not him, but a fascinating study that found that progressive elites, when they
Mm,
are in the public square, they articulate a very morally relativistic view. which is that there's really no standard, and they're very confident in public, letting people know that there's really no standard ultimately, about these institutions that I'm writing about.
Yeah.
But the study confirmed that when the cameras are not whirring and the lights are off, and the liberal elites, by and large, there are great exceptions, of course there are, but by and large, progressive elites in their own home lives live quite conservatively. Especially progressive elites who are educated at the college level, at least to the college level. They tend to get and stay married. They tend to have their children inside of marriage. They tend to provide a home and moral ecology that allows their biological children to thrive beyond their own home life. Their faith, overwhelmingly among progressive elites in this demographic, is quite constant, as is their work ethic.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that progressive elites ought to have the courage of their convictions, and when they're in the public square, they ought to stand up and say, here's what works, because the fact is, it does.
It's so fascinating you raised that, Tim, because I make that point often about Governor Moore. But as you were talking, it clicked in my mind. The point you just made is true also for our new Speaker of the House of Delegates, Speaker Pena Melnick, who is my delegate here in Maryland, and also our Senate President, Bill Ferguson, both very happily married, both hardworking people, had their kids within that marriage, and have, by all accounts, wonderful family lives. It's a great point.
Yeah. Well, may I say thank you. I think we've had a kind of a shimmering of this debate
Mhm.
because just a few weeks ago, Justice Clarence Thomas gave probably the most important speech of his time on the Supreme Court. I would
Sure.
say the only equal to that speech was his commanding, remarkable commencement address at Hillsdale College a few years ago.
Yeah.
But the speech that Justice Thomas gave demonstrated in great Lincoln Douglas fashion the direct impact of the malevolence of progressive ideas in the public square and on the Constitution.
Yep.
And across time. And I posit that over against another very strange moment we had in the United States Senate when his colleague, now Justice Jackson, was at the confirmation table, and she was asked by Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, "Can you define a woman?" And of course, sitting behind Justice Jackson was her husband, who's a medical doctor. And of course, everybody knows. Progressives and conservatives, everybody who was in the hearing room and watching, everybody knows that she can define a woman. But why did she have to not tell what a woman is? Why did she stand down? Those are the cultural headwinds that we're up against. And by the way, they're real and they are monetized. We have to remember that moral relativism and nihilism is very wealthy. And in the public debate of our time, I think we have to acknowledge that.
So you go through these broad subjects, and there's one chapter that I want to just ask a question about overall. You have a whole chapter on restoring the American male, and
Yes.
as your eye goes down the table of contents, uh, my eye stopped at that, and of course I thought, well, if you have a chapter on the American male, where's the chapter on the American female? We just talked about
Yeah.
what a female was. Why did you decide to devote a whole chapter to restoring the American male?
Well, as you know, Jeff, in What Really Matters, every single one of those chapters, I posit sobering news over against hopeful news. The
Mm,
sobering news is that 3 of every 4 suicides and drug overdoses in the United States come and arise from American men. That's
mm,
extraordinary.
yeah,
I think we saw an example of this kind of unevenness very recently in Washington
yeah.
with the young would be assassin. By the way, only 31 years old.
Mm,
I think also, which I quote in the book, is that 15% of all American men say they have no friends. I
mm,
mean, really? That should shock us.
Yes.
The kind of discord and the kind of social dislocation, the loneliness crisis, the dating recession, these things are real. So I think we have to say, in the demographic of young American men, particularly, let's say 18 to 30, we rightfully need to be concerned. On the other hand, and I think this is important, that
Yeah.
there is a whole other demographic in that same line of Americans who, young men, they say they're going back to church. They want faith and religion to be a center part of their life. They say they want to be married. They want to have children. I mean, I think this is quite exciting. Um, we look at self harm. We look at all kinds of eating disorders among young American women in the same demographic. Very, very serious. But aspirationally, millions of American women say they want to be married, they want to have children.
Yeah.
They want the man to be responsible as a potential husband, and if they have children, as a great father. So I think that we have to say, we have to posit the kind of stark, sobering news in young America to the hopeful side. And both are true, I think, at the same time.
That's great. Well, as we come to the end of our time, Tim, I want to ask one final question, and that is, what do you expect readers in general? But then I want to ask you specifically, what do you expect pastors
Yeah.
to take away from reading this book in terms of what should we do after we've read what you have written
Mhm.
here?
A great friend of mine, President George W. Bush, recently did an interview with his daughter on NBC.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful interview, and I commend it to people. It's kind of a reminder of this very, very talented former president, and he speaks in this interview, Jeff, about the fact that democracy is not a spectator sport.
Hmm.
That you have to get involved, and that it's not just, and I think this is very important, not just the political class or the media class or the legal class or the education class. We need everybody involved. But I think, to your very specific point, we need more than ever pastors and the church to enter the public square.
Hmm.
God gave us the family, He gave us the government, and He gave us the church. And we
Yeah.
all understand these are extraordinary institutions, and the family is not the church is not government, government is not the church, etc.
Yeah.
People need to understand that, and I think by and large people do. But I think that pastors have a very unique role. They need to engage. And if we are going to successfully address these issues of the heart, these issues of spirit, these cultural trend lines among especially the rising generation of young Americans, and I'm here to say it from the rooftops, if I may, we need pastors more involved in the public square than ever. And we need them now. They were fundamental to the American Revolution. They were fundamental in the Civil War. They were fundamental in the moral and social revolution of the 60s. They were fundamental in the pro-life and in the civil rights debates, fundamental in homeschooling, school choice, and charter schools. And we need them now. And we need the church and pastors to step up, to look at the rising generation and to acknowledge that they have a role peerless in the way that we shape the next 50 and even 250 years of this really rather remarkable country that we get to live in.
Our guest today has been Tim Goeglein, Vice President at Focus on the Family, talking about his new book, What Really Matters, which we commend to you, all of our listeners. Tim, thank you for writing the book. Thank you for your friendship, your support of the Maryland Family Institute, and thank you for being a guest on Maryland Family Matters.
I am really grateful, Jeff, and I'm eager to say one thing before we close, which is that I'm a great admirer of Frederick Douglass.
Mm.
I mean, a great admirer of his from your state. And there's no person in the entire state of Maryland whose character, integrity, and generosity of heart matches yours and the organization that you're leading. And what you all are doing is the most important work in Maryland. And those of us that focus on the family strongly support you. And we hope others will stand up, stand forward, and support you. They've got a very talented and great leader in you, Jeff. And I thank you so much for this time together.
Thank you, Tim.
God bless.